Hello, Whispering Bee family. Welcome back. Today, we're stepping into the story of Autumn Hayes and a life that didn't turn out the way she thought it would. Sometimes, the life you thought you wanted breaks, so the life you deserve can begin. But what happens when your second chance is built on a secret you're not sure you can carry? This is a story about love, betrayal, and the quiet, complicated journey of choosing yourself again. Autumn Hayes had spent 3 years clawing her way up the corporate ladder, each rung harder than the last. Late nights at the office, skipped meals, canceled plans, all sacrifices on the altar of ambition. At 29, she was finally seeing the fruits of her labor, a senior marketing position at a prestigious firm, a salary that didn't make her wince at the grocery store, and the grudging respect of her colleagues. But success at work couldn't fill the silence of her apartment at night. Then she met Carlos. Carlos Thornton swept into her life at a charity gala her company sponsored. He was everything she'd dreamed of, immaculately dressed, well-spoken, with a warm smile that seemed to light up just for her. He told her he was a financial consultant for international clients, which explained his frequent travel. He was attentive, remembered the small things she mentioned, and made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. For 14 months, Autumn floated through life on a cloud of happiness. Her career was thriving, and finally, so was her heart. "When do I get to meet this mystery man?" her best friend Esther asked one afternoon over coffee. "You've been together over a year, and I still haven't laid eyes on him." "He travels so much for work," Autumn explained, though even as she said it, a tiny seed of doubt took root. "But he'll be back next week. I promise I'll introduce you." When Esther finally met Carlos at a dinner Autumn had carefully planned, her friend's smile never quite reached her eyes. 3 days later, Esther showed up at Autumn's apartment, her expression grim. "I need to show you something." What Esther revealed shattered Autumn's world into pieces. Carlos Thornton wasn't a financial consultant, he was a car salesman at a mid-tier dealership. He wasn't traveling for international clients, he was staying with his wife and 2 children in the suburbs. The condo he'd shown her in photos belonged to his brother. His investment portfolio, borrowed pictures from the internet. Even his last name was a lie, it was actually Kowalski. Esther had hired a private investigator after something about Carlos struck her as off during their dinner. The man had a pattern. He targeted successful women, spun elaborate stories, borrowed money that was never repaid, and disappeared when the threads started unraveling. Autumn hadn't loaned him money, yet, but the investigator found evidence that Carlos had been positioning himself to ask for a significant investment opportunity. When Autumn confronted him, Carlos's mask slipped. The charming gentleman vanished, replaced by a defensive, angry stranger who blamed her for snooping and not trusting him. He stormed out angrily, leaving his backpack and leaving her sobbing on her living room floor. The weeks that followed were dark. Autumn threw herself into work with a manic energy born of pain. She stopped dadding, stopped believing, stopped hopping. Her mother, Grace, flew in for 2 weeks to cook her meals and sit with her in silence when words wouldn't help. Esther and her other best friend, Maya, took turns checking in, dragging her out for walks when she'd spent too many days inside her own head. "You're not broken," her mother said firmly one evening. "You were betrayed. There's a difference. Don't let him take your future along with your past." Slowly, painfully, Autumn rebuilt herself. She poured her energy into her career, and the universe seemed to reward her focus. A major campaign she led went viral, bringing her company unprecedented attention. Promotions followed. Opportunities opened like flowers after rain. But she wore her scars like armor, and her heart stayed locked away. 2 years after Carlos, Autumn's boss cornered her in the hallway. "You're taking a vacation," he announced. "That's not a request. You haven't used a single day off in 18 months. I'm sending you away before you burn out on my watch." That's how Autumn found herself in Montana, at a rustic resort nestled in the mountains. She had no plans except to read, hike, and remember what relaxation felt like. She met Jard Sullivan on her second day, in the resort's small library. He was reading Cormac McCarthy in a worn armchair, his weathered hands and flannel shirt marking him as decidedly not the usual resort clientele. When she reached for a book on the same shelf, they'd struck up a conversation about Western literature that stretched into an hour. Jard was 41, with crow's feet around his eyes and calloused hands from years of working as a master carpenter. He wasn't smooth like Carlos had been. He was direct, sometimes blunt, with a dry sense of humor that caught Autumn off guard. He didn't try to impress her with fabricated accomplishments. Instead, he told her honestly that he was hiding from his ex-wife back in Colorado. "Moneymonger is too kind a word for Rachel," he said with a bitter laugh. "She's convinced I'm hiding assets, constantly threatening to drag me back to court. I needed to breathe air that didn't have her demands in it." They kept running into each other, at the coffee shop in town, on hiking trails, at the small bookstore Autumn discovered. What started as hello evolved into conversations about the places they'd always wanted to see. Iceland's northern lights, the lavender fields of Provence, the temples of Kyoto. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became long walks where they shared their scars, his failed marriage, her devastating betrayal. Neither tried to fix the other, they just listened. When their vacations ended, they exchanged numbers, both pretending it was just friendly. But the texts started that night, and they never really stopped. 2 months later, Jard flew to Seattle to see her for a weekend. 3 months after that, she flew to Denver. The flights became routine, the long-distance calls every evening a necessity rather than a luxury. "This is crazy," Autumn told Esther. "I swore off men. I built a fortress. And here I am, flying across the country for someone I've known for 6 months." "Maybe that's the point," Esther replied. "You didn't go looking, you let it happen." A year after they met, Autumn flew to Denver to meet Jard's children. Gavin was 13, already shooting up tall like his father, with a quiet intensity that reminded her of Jard. Caleb was 11, all energy and endless questions, the family's comedian. Violet was 9, sharp-eyed and observant, clearly the one who managed her brothers with an iron will disguised as sweetness. "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Caleb asked within 5 minutes of meeting her, earning himself an elbow from Gavin and a glare from Violet. "Yes," Autumn answered honestly, because Jard had taught her that straightforward was better than sugar-coated with kids. "Cool," Caleb said, and that was apparently that. The kids were polite but distant during that first visit. Understandable, given that their mother had already cycled through 2 serious boyfriends since the divorce. Jard co-parented on a strict schedule, every other week with the kids, navigating Rachel's constant demands for additional child support despite her own successful real estate career. "She uses the money as a weapon," Jard explained. "If she's mad at me, suddenly the kids need new laptops or medical procedures that insurance definitely covers. It's exhausting." Autumn saw the strain it put on him, but she also saw how he never spoke ill of Rachel in front of the kids, how he showed up for every soccer game and school play, how he was building them each a custom bookshelf for Christmas even though they'd spend the actual holiday with their mother. This was real. This was the kind of man who showed up. 2 years after Montana, the conversation they'd both been avoiding couldn't be postponed any longer. "I love you," Jard said during one of his visits to Seattle. "I want this to be permanent, but I don't know how to ask you to give up everything you've built here." "I love you too," Autumn replied, "and I don't know how to keep living 2,000 miles away from you." The logistics were brutal. Autumn had her career, her apartment, her life in Seattle. Jard had his business, his children, his custody arrangement that couldn't be disrupted. They'd spent hours discussing scenarios. Jard moving to Seattle, impossible without abandoning his kids. Autumn moving to Denver, possible but terrifying. Trying to maintain long distance indefinitely, unsustainable. Autumn wanted a family of her own. She was 33 now, aware of the ticking clock. Jard already had 3 children and a high-conflict ex-wife. Was she ready to step into that complexity? She was still wrestling with these questions when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hello, can we meet?" Autumn normally deleted messages from unknown numbers immediately, but something made her pause. Curiosity, instinct, she couldn't say. "Who is this?" she typed back. Instead of responding, The number called. Autumn stared at her phone, finger hovering over the decline button. Then, against her better judgment, she answered. Autumn, it's Carlos. The sound of his voice dropped her back into her apartment 3 years ago, the night her world had crumbled. Her hand tightened around the phone. What do you want? Her voice came out cold, which surprised her. She'd expected anger or hurt, but instead felt only ice. I need to see you. It's important. He sounded frantic, breathless. Please, just... No. Autumn, please, just listen. That bag I left at your apartment, remember. When I had to leave suddenly, I need it back. The bag, she'd forgotten about it entirely. After their breakup, she'd moved apartments, and in the chaos of packing, she'd thrown the unremarkable black backpack into a box marked miscellaneous that had ended up on the top shelf of her new closet. I don't have it, she said calmly. I moved. It got thrown out. The string of profanity that erupted from the phone was almost impressive in its creativity and venom. Autumn waited for him to finish. Don't ever contact me again, she said, her voice steady. Lose this number. Forget I exist. She hung up, blocked the number, and sat staring at her phone for a long moment. Then she went to her closet. The box was exactly where she'd shoved it 18 months ago when she moved in, top shelf, back corner, gathering dust. She dragged her step ladder over and pulled it down. The backpack was innocuous, black canvas, worn at the edges, nothing special. She unzipped it. Inside were 3 velvet pouches, each with a small paper tag attached. Her hands trembled as she opened the first pouch. Gold biscuits, 4 of them each stamped with a purity mark. She gasped, nearly dropping the pouch. The second and third pouches contained sheets of gold paper, thin, delicate, pure gold that caught the light like captured sunshine. She carefully unfolded one sheet, marveling at its weightlessness. For 30 seconds, she considered calling Carlos back. Then she remembered his wife, his children, the 14 months of lies, the elaborate fiction he'd constructed, the woman she'd been when she'd trusted him, and the woman she'd become after. Finders keepers, she whispered. Over the next 3 weeks, Autumn became an expert in gold. She learned about melting points and purity testing. She watched YouTube videos on metalworking. She bought a small crucible and melted the gold biscuits and paper one piece at a time in her kitchen, forming small ingots that looked homemade rather than stolen. Then, carefully and methodically, she visited gold dealers across Seattle and the surrounding areas. Never the same dealer twice. Never enough to raise questions. She said she'd inherited jewelry from a grandmother and had melted it down. She paid cash, kept receipts, acted like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. By the time she was finished, she deposited $327,000 into a new bank account. She kept 3 small ingots hidden in her safe deposit box, insurance, or maybe a reminder that sometimes the universe balanced its own scales. She never told anyone, not her mother, not Esther, not Maya. And not Jard. The money sat in her account like a secret, burning a hole in her conscience and simultaneously filling her with a fierce satisfaction. Carlos had tried to use her. Instead, she'd ended up with his ill-gotten gains. The irony wasn't lost on her. A month later, the decision she'd been wrestling with suddenly seemed clear. She could stay in Seattle with her job and her apartment and her carefully constructed life. Or she could leap. She called Jard. I'm coming to Denver. I'm ready. The sound of his sharp intake of breath made her smile. Are you serious? Autumn, I don't want you to give up everything. I'm not giving up anything, she interrupted. I'm choosing something better. I'm choosing us. I love you, he said, voice thick with emotion. God, I love you so much. I love you too. And Jard, I'm ready to meet your chaos head on. Rachel, the kids, all of it, I'm in. Autumn gave 4 weeks' notice at work. Her boss tried to convince her to stay, offering remote work and raises. She declined gracefully. Some decisions weren't about money. She spent those weeks sorting through her life, deciding what to keep and what to release. The furniture went to Goodwill or friends. The clothes she didn't love got donated. The books, the photographs, the small treasures that held memories, Those got carefully packed and shipped to Jard's address in Denver. A week before her flight, she stayed with her mother in Portland. "Are you sure?" Grace asked, though her eyes were warm with approval. "No," Autumn admitted, "but I'm sure I want to try. Isn't that enough?" Grace pulled her daughter into a hug. "That's everything." While she was there, Autumn paid off her mother's credit card debt, $8,000, that Grace had been chipping away at for years. She also hired contractors to update the kitchen and bathrooms, improvements her mother had been putting off. "Autumn, this is too much," Grace protested. "Let me do this," Autumn said firmly. "Please." She didn't mention the gold. That secret stayed buried. She did, however, give her mother a small velvet pouch. "Keep this in your safe," she said, "just in case." Grace asked no questions, just nodded and tucked it away. Jard met her at Denver International Airport with flowers and a smile that made her knees weak. She fell into his arms in the arrivals area, not caring who was watching. "Welcome home," he whispered into her hair. Home, yes, that's what this was. The first few months were an adjustment. Autumn had never lived with a partner before, and certainly never in a blended family situation. The kids were with them every other week, and those weeks were chaos: meals to coordinate, schedules to juggle, homework to supervise, sibling squabbles to referee. Violet warmed to her fastest, perhaps because Autumn never tried to play mother. Instead, she offered to teach Violet to bake, and they spent Saturday mornings making elaborate desserts while the boys slept in. Caleb was easy. His default setting was friendly. He chattered about video games and his friends, and seemed to accept Autumn's presence as naturally as he accepted new DLC drops. Gavin was harder. He was quiet, watchful, protective of his father and siblings. Autumn gave him space, never pushing, just being consistently present and reliable. One evening, 4 months after she'd moved in, Gavin asked her to help him with a school essay. "Dad's terrible at writing," he explained. "You're good at that stuff, right?" It was an olive branch. Autumn took it carefully. "I'd be happy to help." After that, something shifted. Gavin started including her in conversations, asking her opinion, treating her like someone who belonged. 6 months after Autumn arrived, Jard proposed. Not with fanfare or a public display, just the two of them on a hike, overlooking the mountains, where he pulled out a simple ring and said, "Marry me. Build a life with me. Be my partner in all this beautiful chaos." "Yes," she said, because there was no other answer her heart would allow. They started planning a wedding, keeping it small and simple. They'd do it in Portland, Autumn decided, with her mother and friends there. They'd bring the kids, make it a family trip during summer break. But first, there was someone to tell. Rachel reacted about as well as expected when Jard informed her he was getting married. The texts came in rapid fire, accusations and demands, and threats to modify the custody arrangement. Jard handled it with the weary patience of someone who'd been doing this dance for years. "She'll settle down," he assured Autumn. "She always does. She just likes the drama." The kids had mixed reactions. Violet was thrilled and immediately started planning what dress she'd wear. Caleb shrugged and said, "Cool, can we get pizza for dinner?" Gavin was quiet but gave Jard a hug, which spoke volumes. In July, all 5 of them flew to Portland. Grace's house became headquarters for a small, perfect ceremony in her backyard. Esther and Maya stood up for Autumn. Jard's brother flew in from Texas to be his best man. The kids sat in the front row, dressed up and fidgety. When Autumn walked down the makeshift aisle in her simple ivory dress, Jard's eyes filled with tears. When they said their vows, Violet cried too, setting off Caleb, who punched Gavin's arm in embarrassment when his own eyes watered. "You may kiss your bride," the officiant said, and when Jard dipped Autumn dramatically, the kids groaned and laughed. After 2 weeks in Portland, showing the kids the city, introducing them to Autumn's life before Denver, eating too much good food, they flew back to Colorado. They dropped the kids at Rachel's house, enduring her icy silence and sharp looks, then immediately headed to the airport again. Their honeymoon was Cork, Ireland, a small coastal city Autumn had always wanted to see. They stayed in a bed-and-breakfast, slept late, walked along the water, and explored tiny bookshops and pubs. They bought woolly sweaters for the kids, a Cladog ring for Grace, shot glasses for themselves as tacky souvenirs. They didn't do anything extraordinary. They simply existed together, unhurried and unscheduled. It was perfect. Back in Denver, life resumed its rhythm. Autumn settled into a routine she'd never expected to enjoy. She became a homemaker, something her younger self would have scoffed at. She kept the house running, cooked elaborate meals, tended a small garden on their patio. During the weeks when the kids were with Rachel, she and Jard would take day trips or work on home improvement projects together. It was different from her corporate life, but not lesser, just different. But Autumn had a secret project. She'd been quietly searching real estate listings for months, looking for a property that could accommodate their growing family. The house Jard owned was nice but cramped when the kids were there. 3 bedrooms meant Violet had her own space, but the boys shared, and there was no home office, no room to spread out. Autumn wanted space, room for the kids to grow, a real yard where they could play, a garden where she could grow more than patio tomatoes. She found it on a Tuesday in March, a 5-acre lot on the outskirts of Denver, far enough out to feel rural but close enough to Jard's workshop and the kids' schools. The land had mature trees, a small stream running through the back corner, and was zoned for residential construction. That same day, she took a pregnancy test. Both lines turned pink immediately. When Jard came home that evening, Autumn was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 photos side by side, the property listing and the positive test. Jard stopped in the doorway, looking from the photos to her face. Are you? I'm pregnant, she said, her voice breaking with joy, and I found us land to build a house. He crossed the room in 3 strides and lifted her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried. When he set her down, there were tears on his cheeks too. A baby, he whispered, pressing his hand to her still flat stomach. Our baby. And a house, she added. 5 bedrooms, big backyard, kitchen, garden, space for everyone. How, he asked, practical concerns creeping in. The land alone must cost. I have money, she said, saved from Seattle, investments. It wasn't entirely a lie. Let me do this for us, for our family. He pulled her close. We'll build it together. They bought the land the following week. The sellers were an elderly couple moving to be closer to grandchildren, and they were charmed by Autumn and Jard's story. The price was fair, the closing quick. Telling the kids required careful planning. They waited until a weekend when all 3 were with them, gathered everyone in the living room, and let Jard make the announcement. Autumn's pregnant. You're going to have a baby brother or sister. The reactions were immediate and varied. Violet squealed and launched herself at Autumn. A baby. Can I help pick names? Can I help decorate the nursery? Caleb looked puzzled. Where's the baby going to sleep? There's no room. Gavin was quiet for a moment, then asked, Are you guys happy about this? Very happy, Autumn said, meeting his eyes. And we're building a new house, big enough for all of us. That's when Gavin smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. That's cool, really cool. They told the kids about the land, brought them out to see it the following weekend. The kids ran around the property, claiming spots for treehouses and soccer goals, arguing about bedroom colors and where the pool should go. There would be no pool, Jard said firmly, but they could dream. My room should be purple, Violet declared, with a window seat. I want a bunk bed, Caleb announced, even though I won't have to share anymore. Bunk beds are just cool. Gavin walked the property line with Jard, discussing foundation placement and septic systems with a seriousness that made Autumn smile. They hired an architect and began designing their home. Autumn pored over plans, Pinterest boards, and design blogs. She wanted something that felt warm and lived in from day one, not cold and modern. The final design was perfect, a 2-story craftsman with a wraparound porch. On the main floor, a great room that flowed into a spacious kitchen with an island big enough for all 6 of them to cook together. Jard's office in one corner, Autumn's reading nook in another, mudroom off the garage, laundry that wasn't in the basement. Upstairs, 5 bedrooms. The master suite with an ensuite bathroom, 3 kids' rooms, each with their own bathroom this time, which the kids declared was the height of luxury, and a nursery painted in soft sage green because they'd decided to be surprised about the gender. The backyard was Autumn's domain. Raised garden beds for vegetables, a herb spiral near the kitchen door, fruit trees along the back fence, and a play structure that Jard built himself. Construction began in April. Every morning after breakfast, Jard and Autumn would drive out to the property to check progress. The foundation went in, then framing, then the roof. The house took shape bone by bone. The kids came sometimes on weekends, wearing hard hats Jard bought them, excitedly watching walls go up. "Can I paint my room myself?" Violet asked. "We'll paint it together," Autumn promised. As the house grew, so did Autumn's belly. By June, she was showing unmistakably. By July, she was waddling. By August, she was ready to be done. Grace flew in during the 3rd trimester as promised, arriving with suitcases full of baby clothes and casseroles for the freezer and a determination to be helpful without being overbearing. "Oh, sweetheart," she said when she saw Autumn's swollen ankles and exhausted face. "Let's get you off your feet." Having her mother there was a comfort Autumn hadn't known she needed. Grace handled the cooking and cleaning, gave Autumn space when she needed it, and rubbed her feet while they watched terrible reality TV together. The house was 90% complete when Autumn went into labor on a sticky August evening. Jard called Rachel to take the kids early, then drove Autumn to the hospital with Grace in the backseat, timing contractions. Labor was long, 16 hours of breathing and swearing and squeezing Jard's hand hard enough to leave bruises. But when they finally placed the baby in Autumn's arms, none of it mattered. "A girl," the nurse announced. She had Jard's nose and Autumn's dark hair, and she was absolutely perfect. "Iris," Autumn whispered, the name they'd secretly chosen. Iris Grace Sullivan. Jard kissed Autumn's sweaty forehead. "She's beautiful, you're beautiful. God, I love you." Grace cried when they told her the baby's middle name. She held Iris for the first time with trembling hands and whispered promises of spoiling and stories and unconditional love. The kids met their sister 2 days later. Rachel had resisted at first, calling it too soon and disruptive, but Jard had stood firm. This was their family, too. Violet held Iris with careful reverence, cooing at her softly. Caleb was less interested, peering at the baby briefly before asking when they could go get food. Gavin surprised everyone by asking if he could hold her, then sitting for 20 minutes with Iris in his arms, staring at her with wonder. "She's so tiny," he murmured. "Was I this small?" "Smaller," Jard said. "You were a month early, barely 5 pounds. "Weird," Gavin said, but he didn't look away from Iris. Grace stayed for 5 months, helping with the endless newborn cycle of feeding and diaper changes and laundry. She rocked Iris during the witching hours, gave Autumn permission to nap, and treated the transition into their new house like a military operation that she was born to command. The move happened when Iris was 3 months old. The old house sold quickly, a young family with 2 kids who loved the neighborhood. Packing with a newborn and 3 part-time kids and 2 adults was chaos, but they managed. The new house welcomed them like it had been waiting. Boxes were unpacked, furniture arranged, curtains hung. The kids decorated their rooms exactly as they'd dreamed, Violet's purple walls with a reading nook by the window. Caleb's bunk bed with a climbing wall leading to the top bunk, Jard's handiwork. Gavin's simple blue room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The nursery became Iris's domain, with her crib and changing table, and the rocking chair that Grace had insisted on buying. Autumn planted her kitchen garden that fall, tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, herbs. She joined a CSA and learned to can preserves. She hired a part-time housekeeper, Maria, to help with the bigger house, which gave her time to focus on Iris and the garden and occasionally on herself. Grace flew home when Iris turned 5 months old, tearfully promising to return for the baby's first birthday. You've built something beautiful here, Grace told Autumn on her last morning. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. Yes, you could have, Grace said firmly, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Life settled into a new rhythm. The weeks with the kids were controlled chaos, school runs and homework battles and sibling spats and family dinners around their big kitchen island. The weeks without them were quieter, focused on Iris and each other and the simple pleasure of being a couple. Rachel remained a constant source of friction, her demands and complaints a background hum they'd learned to tune out. But even she couldn't deny that the kids were thriving. They loved the new house, loved having their own spaces, and seemed genuinely attached to Iris despite the age gap. Iris's first birthday arrived with shocking speed. Grace flew in for the celebration, along with Esther and Maya, who'd been begging to meet the baby. They threw a party in the backyard, too many people, too much food, a smash cake that Iris destroyed with gleeful abandon while everyone took photos. After the guests left and the kids were in bed, Grace took Iris to the nursery for her bedtime routine. Autumn could hear her mother's voice drifting down the stairs, singing a lullaby that had once soothed Autumn herself. Autumn and Jard sat on the back porch with their coffee, watching the sun set over their garden. It had become their ritual, this quiet moment at the end of chaotic days. There's something I need to tell you, Autumn said. Jard turned to her, his expression open and trusting. What's up? So she told him. Everything. Carlos and the bag and the gold, the melting and the selling and the money. How she'd been able to quit her job, buy the land, build the house. How there was still money left, enough to secure their future, enough to make sure Iris and the kids would be okay. Jard listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, silence stretched between them. Did you try to contact him? Jard finally asked, to give it back. No, Autumn's voice was steady. That's the payment he owed me for the year he stole, for the trust he destroyed, for making me doubt my judgment in everyone after him. He called looking for it, and I told him it was gone. I let him wonder and panic and lose sleep. That was my revenge, not contacting him, not giving him peace and living well. Jard was quiet for another moment, then reached for her hand. You could have told me earlier. I know, I'm sorry. It felt like my secret to carry, my past to process. She squeezed his fingers. Are you angry? No, he brought her hand to his lips. I'm in awe of you. You took something stolen and poisonous and turned it into all this. He gestured at the house, the garden, their life. You gave us this foundation, literally. How could I be angry? I should have told you before. Autumn, he turned to face her fully. Listen to me. That money let you walk away from Seattle without financial fear. It let you buy this land and build this house. It gave you security to start over, which meant you could choose this, us, because you wanted to, not because you had no other option. That matters. Your choice matters. Tears spilled down Autumn's cheeks. I love you. I love you too. He wiped her tears away gently. And honestly, the idea of that bastard Carlos somewhere, probably still searching for his stolen gold, while you're here living your best life in a house it bought, that's poetic justice. Autumn laughed through her tears. He was probably planning to use it to scam some other woman. Instead, it helped build a home for 6 people and a really impressive vegetable garden. Jard grinned. I bet that's not how he saw his ill-gotten gains being used. They sat in comfortable silence, the Colorado night settling around them. Inside the house, they could hear Grace's lullaby winding down, and then Iris's soft babbling as she settled into sleep. No more secrets, Jard asked. No more secrets, Autumn promised. Good, he kissed her softly. Though I have to say, I paid for our house with stolen gold from my con artist ex, is possibly the most badass reveal you could have saved for our anniversary. Iris's first birthday seemed more appropriate. Fair point. They sat together as stars emerged overhead, coffee cooling in their mugs, the sounds of their home surrounding them. Autumn thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago, broken and cynical, armor-plated against the world. She thought about the woman she'd become, still scarred, but whole in the places that mattered. Carlos had tried to take from her. Instead, his stolen goods had funded her new beginning. The universe had a sense of humor, and sometimes, if you were patient enough, it delivered justice in unexpected forms. "Thank you for telling me," Jard said quietly. "Thank you for understanding." Always, he pulled her closer and she rested her head on his shoulder. "We're building something real here, Autumn. Something honest. That gold bought us the foundation, but we're building the life on top of it together every day. That's what matters." "Every day," she agreed. From inside, Iris let out a small cry, then settled back into sleep. Grace appeared in the doorway, smiling at them. "She's down. I'm heading to bed myself. You two should get some rest." "Thanks, Mom," Autumn called softly. Grace waved and disappeared back inside. "We should go in," Jard said, but neither of them moved. They sat a while longer, holding each other in the darkness, grateful for the strange paths that had led them here. Autumn had learned that sometimes the worst experiences could fund the best lives, that revenge wasn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it was simply choosing to thrive. She'd been desperate for love once, and a liar had nearly destroyed her. Now she had love, real, complicated, beautiful love, and a family she'd never expected. The gold had bought them space and security, but it was the daily choice to show up for each other that built their actual home. "Ready for bed?" Jard finally asked. "Ready," Autumn said, and they walked inside together, locking the door on the past and stepping into the future they'd built from ashes and unexpected gold. 5 years later, on a sunny afternoon, Autumn was in her garden when her phone buzzed with a news alert. A man named Carlos Kowalski had been arrested for running an elaborate investment fraud scheme, targeting wealthy women across 3 states. The article included his mugshot, older now, worn down, but unmistakably him. She stared at the photo for a long moment, feeling nothing but a distant satisfaction. Then she deleted the alert and went back to her tomatoes. Justice took many forms. Hers had been building a life so full and rich that Carlos became nothing more than a footnote in someone else's news story, a cautionary tale she'd long since stopped telling. Iris came running out of the house, now 6 years old with her father's easy laugh and her mother's determination. "Mom, Caleb says I can't help with his robotics project, but I want to help." "Let's go negotiate," Autumn said, brushing dirt from her hands. She took her daughter's hand and walked back into the house where her husband was mediating between teenagers and the scent of dinner simmered on the stove. This was her revenge, a life well lived, a family well loved, and a past that no longer had any power over her present. And that, Autumn thought as Iris dragged her toward the inevitable sibling negotiations, was better than gold.